know, it's said that I can't remember the actual wording, but if you find yourself viscerally displeased by someone or a group of people, there's a lesson in there about yourself. I think what happens psychologically when we have a visceral reaction, adverse reaction to someone, a group of people, whatever, it's a reflection of an identity that we have in ourselves. Something that we have held on to, most likely an artificial construct that we've created in our mind about ourselves, a kind of identity. For example, imagine someone who is someone who identifies with their being at a high moral and ethical place. They feel themselves to be in a kind of pedestal. This often happens with religious people, but people can be religious and spiritual without identifying as that. So I'm trying to draw a distinction here between being and identifying. So take a devout Christian A and devout Christian B. One of these two has an idea about themselves as being that Christian person who sacrifices day in and day out to follow the Christian prescription of life. The other Christian, on the other hand, just simply is a Christian. They don't value that about themselves. Perhaps that's a way to describe what identity is when you value something about yourself because of something that you do or you are. If you overvalue yourself because of those things, then you develop an identity. And it's within identity that judgment emerges and discrimination. And so when you find yourself viscerally disgusted or viscerally repulsed or viscerally judgmental about a particular person, a particular way of life, chances are you have developed an identity that prevents you from being the way that other person is. And so there's a kind of resentment of seeing, here's this person living a life in a manner that I have chosen not to live, but because I have developed an over identity with that lifestyle, I have also determined and reinforced the idea that anything other than that is bad. And so you can often learn a lot about yourself by the people that you dislike. What are some, it tells you a story about things that you're holding on to about yourself in a manner that is probably not the healthiest way. Ideally, the path that we choose and plot in life is one that we can sit easily in. Hard to put what I'm trying to express into words, but hopefully it's coming across. I learned this lesson about myself. There was a guy that I would occasionally see and come into contact with, and a nice guy, but for some reason it just bothered me. Him as a person. And I couldn't wrap my head around why. His character traits were kind of arrogant and kind of very sure of himself. Despite there not being much about him that was necessarily noteworthy, right? So it was kind of like an unearned sense of self-respect. Now, there's nothing, I don't think, inherently wrong with that. And yet it bothered me. And so I kept thinking about it because I knew that there was nothing wrong with him, that really there was something wrong with me. Why was I being so judgmental of this guy? Well, it taught me that I had been holding on to an over-identification with myself. This was longer ago. I'm a different person since then. But I was over-identifying myself with my own humility and meekness. Like it was, I mean, think about how cringy that is. That a person could be humble and meek, but yet internally take pride in their humility and their meekness, right? See how wrong that is? And it helped me. It was in that moment that I learned this lesson. And only subsequently did I find out that this sentiment has been expressed by many people in different ways. If I can find the wording, I'll put it down. I've heard at least two different versions of trying to explain. I think one of them is from Carl Jung. I'll put it in the comments if I can find it. Now, it's quite possible that I had heard these philosophical explanations before, but it just went in one ear and out the other. I think Alan Watts said, you can't really teach anything to anyone unless they already know what it is you're teaching them. I'm paraphrasing, but it's essentially trying to say that you really can't communicate anything to anyone unless they already understand what it is you're trying to communicate to them. Which is interesting, because one of the things I do is I teach, and so I have a lot of mixed feelings about that, but there's a lot of truth to it as well. So when I teach, my method is largely one of creating a journey for my students to travel through, so that along that path, along that journey, they can learn things on their own, rather than me trying to impose a learning upon them. I found that has been kind of the most effective method for education, and that's what I've learned just through my own teaching experience. Anyway, I thought that would be a thought worth sharing. Let me know what you think.